Hey, and welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to look at rotoscoping. So rotoscoping is when you need to have an object that goes behind something in your scene. So let's say the zombie is going behind the building. We will have to do some rotoscoping there. But as I mentioned before, we actually got a bit lucky, and because we added a shadow catcher plane on this side of the building, it's already masking out our zombie. You can see there it's not really showing up behind the building. So what I did, I just basically rendered the zombie on its own layer, and that's just what I'm going to use to show you. Let's say we had something that was in the foreground. So I'm going to load this image sequence that I rendered, just the zombie on its own. I'm just going to set up the frame rate, and let's say we drop that on top of our footage, and we just load the extractor, and then we just set this to combined so we can see our zombie. So here you can see now that our zombie is visible even behind the building. And if you have something like that where some of the footage will have to be in front of your render, then you will have to do some rotoscoping. So let me show you how easy it is to rotoscope something like this. So I've got my two layers here. You can ignore all of these other layers for now. I've disabled them. I'm just using these two layers, the footage and then also the zombie layer on its own. So what we need to do is we need to place our footage above our zombie, or a copy of the footage above the zombie. So I'm going to duplicate this footage layer, and then I'm going to move this layer above the zombie. And obviously you will see that we can't see the zombie anymore because the footage is now in front of the zombie. So what we need to do is we need to cut out this section of the wall and basically place it on top of the zombie. So I'm just going to zoom in here a bit, and then I'm going to take the pen tool and then make sure you are on the layer that's just above the zombie. And I'm going to draw a mask. I'm just going to click here, click there, and kind of just draw a mask and mask out this area of the wall. And now if you scrub forward, you can obviously see that that mask is not moving with the footage. So we will have to add some keyframes just to keep that mask on the edge of that wall. So as you can see, our zombie is kind of creeping up behind the mask there. So what we need to do is let's open up this layer. Let's just expand it and then expand masks. And you can see this is our mask that we just drew on frame number 1. Expand that as well, and then enable this little stopwatch next to mask path, and that's going to enable us to add keyframes to that mask. Alright, so let's just zoom out here slightly so we can see this a bit better. So on frame 1 we can see the mask is perfectly fine there. Then I'm going to go to like maybe 2 seconds, and now I'm going to double click on this mask. So make sure you double click on the edge, and now you can move that whole mask around. So I'm just going to align it with the wall again. If you click on the edge, you can kind of rotate it. Let's just zoom in here slightly more, and you can rotate it as well, and you can obviously just kind of align it with that wall. Let's go to about 3 seconds. Let's do the same thing. Let's move that mask. You can also move the individual points. So if you just click on the mask like this, you can just move these points individually. Sometimes it's a bit easier to do it like that. And let's just go through here and add some keyframes. So I'm just kind of jumping 1 second ahead and kind of just masking this out. You can see our zombie already is out of the way. So these last frames doesn't really matter. We can just kind of roughly move it into place. Let's go to 1 second. Let's align that one as well. Alright, so obviously you might need to add more keyframes if you have a more complex camera move. But usually just a few frames like this, if it's something like a wall, should do pretty well. Let's just go through here. So add as many keyframes as you need to mask that object that needs to be in front. And then what we need to do is, if you look at this without looking at the mask, you can see there's a very sharp edge there. You can't really see it here because it's a bit blurry, but what we want to do is we want to blur or feather this mask slightly. So under the mask settings, you've got this mask feather, and if I increase this number, you can see there it's kind of blurring the edge a bit. So we just want to place it on like maybe like 3 pixels for this shot, And if we look at it now, you can see, if we play it back, you can see that's looking pretty nice. The edge is not too sharp, but it's kinda it's also not too soft. So if you look at this layer on its own, the one that we masked, that is basically that layer on its own. So it's just that mask that's kind of moving around, and we're placing that on top of our zombie layer. So there you can basically see exactly what we are doing. If I zoom in here, you can see we've got this layer in front or above, and then our zombie behind it, and then behind that we've got our footage, and then basically it's all matching up. So obviously for our example, we didn't really have to do anything with the zombie because we had that shadow catcher in there that basically helped us out with the masking process. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete these two layers again, because obviously we don't need to do that. But now you know how to rotoscope something if you have something that needs to be in front of one of your rendered objects. So maybe you added an object that's maybe behind something else in the scene. Maybe just play around and see if you can roto out something that's in front of a rendered object. And then you can go ahead and save your project, and I will see you in the next lesson.